Question was, what is a hard currency? A hard currency, by definition, is something that cannot be conjured from nothing. A hard currency is something that requires work to get it. And I don't mean like, you going to your job. I'm not talking about that necessarily. I'm talking about the currency in and of itself. The money in and of itself has to be something that by definition can't just be pulled out of the ether. Okay, there's two currencies that I can think of that come to mind that fit that definition. Number one being gold. It's the most obvious. Why gold? Because by virtue of it works like this. You either have it or you don't. Like, we're talking about physical gold. We're not talking about the paper markets. Okay, we're talking about physical gold, the actual yellow metal that you can hold in your hands. Okay, little yellow metal discs or ingots or dust or whatever. Okay. You either have it or you don't. It either weighs or it doesn't. It's either pure or it's not. That's it. That's all there is to gold. Okay? So, by virtue of price paid to pull it out of the ground and do stuff with it, like maybe smelt it, turn coins, what have you, by virtue of that, that's where your value comes from. It's oddly enough, this is where, some of the libertarians and the Mises people don't like to kind of admit this, I think, but it's like, that actually, after a fashion, is sort of labor theory of value, if you want to think about it in those terms. I'm not a Marxist, but that kind of is, if you understand the way that mechanism works, because you have to pay somebody to go and pull it out of the ground, right? So, and of course, if you have to pay them in gold, then you need gold to get gold, right? That's how that works. So, but number one is gold, and it's been around for a long time, and it's always encouraged that if you're going to use gold as your currency, and I don't care if you want to do that, that's fine, we can do that. I'm good with it. But just keep in mind, it cannot be digital gold, it cannot be gold backed. I've gone over this repeatedly. You can't do stuff like that, because the people who are in control of the gold backing or the accounting, well, I just told you the problem, the word people. Right? That's the problem. As soon as you involve people in that are your so-called trusted third parties, they will eventually become bankers. It's just what they turn into, right? They turn into bankers. They turn into the idea of, hey, no one ever comes in to get any of this gold. Maybe I can, put out more notes than there is gold to back it. Happens every time. And it will always happen. And it doesn't make any difference how good the accounting is. It doesn't make any difference with any of that, because eventually the people who are in the accounting side of it will eventually be bribed as well. It's just, or compromised in some way or other. It's just how it is. Okay. So number one is gold. Number two is Bitcoin. And Bitcoin fits in the same category of this. And you can say, well, but that's just magic internet money. You haven't researched it enough. If people are still saying shit like that, I know one thing about you. You haven't actually done even 4 hours of just researching on your own. I know that about you, because it's not magic. It does take enormous amounts of energy to mine it, and it is finite. You either have it or you don't. That's it. You don't have to worry about weight and content. Okay, you don't have to worry about that because it is digital, and that's fine. But because it's finite, right? That's how it works. It actually is finite, and it's stated that it's finite. This is why, by definition, it cannot be a Ponzi scheme. For those Ponzi scheme, this is another one of these words that's starting to lose all of its meaning altogether. You need to look up the story of Charles Ponzi. If you have not read the story of Charles Ponzi, dude, there are tons of people on the internet who have broken that down. It's one of the most studied things out there. Go on YouTube. There are guys who break down the entire life of Charles Ponzi. And Charles Ponzi was not the guy who invented the Ponzi scheme. The borrow from Peter to pay Paul scheme has been around for thousands of years. Even your Christ talked about this. Okay, this is thousands of years old. These things have been around forever. It's not new. It's not a new thing. Just like everything you're seeing right now, like none of this is new. This has happened thousands of times. throughout all of human history in localized pockets all over the world. This has happened a lot. And it's just going to keep happening until you learn from it. We now have the opportunity with the internet, for example, for now, for the next few months or so, till this all goes away and then it all gets memory hold and everybody forgets about all this shit. But you have an opportunity right now to understand this stuff. Look up a Ponzi scheme and read about it. Read about Charles Ponzi and read how that actually works. It works on the idea of infinity. It is the exact opposite of Bitcoin, or even gold for that matter. But gold, we don't know how much gold there is. That is the correct answer. We don't know. But in Bitcoin, you know exactly how much there is. So you have to look at the idea and say, okay, well, how much Bitcoin is there? Well, there's 21 million coin units, 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis. A Satoshi is just a piece of a Bitcoin. So when you understand that, it is the opposite. It's the direct opposite. It can't by definition be one because it's stated overtly this is finite. The number of Satoshis in circulation for the world is in fact a finite number, and it is explained that way. Well, but it keeps going up in value. No, the value is already fixed. What's happened is that more and more people are realizing that your dollar is worth nothing. That's the problem right there. The problem is that the dollar currency has been printed to worthlessness. Do you realize? Let's say that you had $100 in your savings account. Let's say that's what you had, just $100 for easy math. Do you realize that in 1912, if you had $100 in a savings account, right, that would be the purchasing power equivalent of, well, depending on whose numbers you use. If you want to use, I'm a little higher than that because I look at the numbers for what they really are based on actual purchasing power. But if you wanted to look at purchasing power even using their numbers, you've got $10,000 worth of purchasing power because it's basically 100 times of loss of its purchasing power. So imagine having $100 in your savings account in 1912, which would be the equivalent of somebody today having 10 grand in a savings account. How many people today in the U.S. have $10,000 in their savings account? Not their 401ks and all that Jim bullshit. None of that. How many people actually have $10,000 in cash in the bank right now they can go get immediately if they need to? Not many. It's probably not even 1%. That's how small that number is. So I hope that answers the question.